Listen, before we dive into this absolute madness unfolding in Cleveland, I need your help. We're pushing hard to hit 1,000 subscribers, and every single one of you watching makes that dream possible. If this kind of raw, unfiltered NFL coverage speaks to you, smash that subscribe button right now. Let's build this community together and keep bringing you the stories the league doesn't want told. You only say negative stuff about me. That's what Shedeur Sanders could be thinking right now as he watches his NFL dream turn into a living nightmare. The Cleveland Browns just announced their third-round pick, Dillon Gabriel, will start Sunday against the Minnesota Vikings in London. And when reporters asked Shedeur about getting passed over again, the kid went completely silent. Not angry silent, not frustrated silent, but eerily calm silent, like a man who's figured out the game is rigged and decided to stop playing by their rules. From Rex Ryan's brutal public destruction of his character, to Shedeur's haunting, wordless protest, to the whispers claiming Cleveland's front office sabotaged him before he even touched the field. This is pure chaos, and the league hasn't seen a storm like this in years. It's all centered around one young man who refuses to stay quiet, and absolutely, because whatever he says, they're going to twist his words anyway. If you say nothing, you know there's really no story on any other team. There are 31 other teams, and do any of those media members talk to the third-string quarterback? No. But here it's controversy. Why create controversy? How do you not create it? By when they ask you questions, just don't answer. That's the calculated silence of someone who's learned that in this league, your words become weapons against you faster than you can take them back. The NFL might sell dreams of glory and greatness, but behind those shiny helmets and billion-dollar contracts hides a ruthless game of politics, egos, and raw power. Right now, no story captures that cold reality better than what's happening to Shedeur Sanders, the son of primetime himself, Deion Sanders. The legacy alone should have guaranteed respect, but instead it feels like he's fighting the system itself, like the entire infrastructure of professional football decided this kid needed to be humbled before he ever proved he belonged. Shedeur wasn't supposed to be just another quarterback prospect. He was meant to be the one, but he's not a 5th-round pick. So we should ask him to act like a 5th-round pick because that's not what we believe he is. For me, look, if he took the pro route and said, look, I'm happy for Dillon, hopefully he goes out there and plays well. I feel bad for Joe, but you know, this is the game of football, this is a business. And hey, I'm just happy for Dillon and my job doesn't change, right? I go out there, I prepare, then maybe the narrative shifts. But expecting perfection from a kid who's been disrespected at every turn while giving grace to everyone else, that's the double standard eating this story alive. A true generational talent ready to flip the script and drag his father's legacy straight into the modern NFL spotlight, but instead of being celebrated, he's been torn down by analysts, demoted by coaches, and quietly buried by Cleveland's own front office. It's like the franchise didn't want a star. They wanted silence. They wanted compliance. They wanted a kid who would thank them for scraps and never ask why he wasn't eating at the table. Going into the 2025 NFL Draft, Shedeur Sanders wasn't hype. He was proof. Multiple analysts had him pegged as the potential #1 overall pick, not out of favoritism, but pure facts, stats, tape, and performances that screamed dominance. His 2024 season at Colorado wasn't just impressive, it was historic, and now the same talent that once made headlines is caught in a storm the NFL can't ignore. This was being called the biggest draft slide in NFL history, bigger than Aaron Rodgers in 2005, more jaw-dropping than Lamar Jackson in 2018. Shedeur Sanders didn't just fall a few spots. He plummeted in real time while the whole world watched in disbelief. It was the kind of drop that instantly set off alarms everywhere, sparking a national frenzy about what really went down behind those secretive NFL war room doors. Something wasn't adding up, and people wanted answers fast. Joe Flacco was in Cleveland once before, and they let him go. He was in Indy, and he wasn't the answer. Let me get this straight. He wasn't the answer the first time around in Cleveland. He wasn't the answer in Indy. He wasn't the answer at the Jets. But now he's going to be the answer this time around. Joe Flacco hadn't been the answer since 2012 when he took the Ravens to the Super Bowl, and that's it. The man is 40 years old, running on fumes and nostalgia, yet somehow he's still ahead of Shedeur on the depth chart like youth and talent don't matter anymore. Then came the real madness. Almost immediately after the draft, whispers of collusion started catching fire. NFL legends began stepping up. Eric Dickerson himself claimed there was a league-wide blackballing against Shedeur Sanders. And that's not some random hot take. That's a Hall of Famer with decades of experience calling out what he sees. That's a great piece of television from Rex Ryan. Hats off to Rex and ESPN. So we're finally seeing this speaks to a cultural change. This is a black quarterback he's talking about, and he's talking pretty salty and spicy about him, and I think he's talking accurately about him. He said, if I know other coaches around the league are talking about it, you're lazy. You're not a leader. You're not at the front of the meeting room learning and soaking up everything you can. Those are heavy accusations backed by zero evidence. Just vibes and assumptions dressed up as insider knowledge. Even Boomer Esiason went on WFAN saying multiple owners had straight up told their general managers to erase Sanders from their draft boards completely. He said owners were giving direct orders like, take him off. I don't want that guy. That's not normal draft talk. That's power being flexed in the shadows. That's billionaires deciding a kid's future based on factors that have nothing to do with football. Let that sink in. We're not talking about a kid who ran a slow 40-yard dash or missed throws at the combine. This wasn't about skill. It was about control. It's just unusual to see the starter get benched. And well, I guess it's common because when Russ got benched, Jackson Dart came in to start and Russell went to the backup, right? So I guess it's not unusual as we might think it is. You're like, well, hold on. Flacco got benched. Shedeur was already third. Shouldn't everybody just move up a spot? But that's seemingly not how they did it, because Brian DeBole said that Jackson Dart would start the rest of the season and Russ would serve as his backup and Jameis stays where Jameis is. The logic breaks down when you realize they're making decisions that defy the normal hierarchy just to keep Shedeur buried. We're talking billionaire owners allegedly scheming to keep a talented, confident black quarterback with a legendary father and a bold image out of their spotlight. The reasons swirling around this scandal are wild and chilling. Some insiders say it's payback for Deion Sanders shaking up the old power game in college football, breaking traditions and winning his own way, making the establishment uncomfortable because he refused to kiss the ring. Others say it's about the discomfort certain circles still have with a black quarterback who flaunts diamond watches, drives luxury cars, signs massive NIL deals, and refuses to apologize for his wealth or success. That image, that confidence, it scares people who still believe athletes should be seen and not heard, especially black athletes. And then there's the craziest theory of them all, Shedeur's rumored contract demands. Word is he asked for something unheard of, a piece of team merchandise and media revenue. That kind of move could have flipped the NFL's entire money system upside down, and apparently that scared some very powerful people because once one player gets that deal, everyone starts asking why they don't have it too. The old guard was furious. Former Congressman Jamal Bowman didn't hold back, saying the NFL was scared of strong black men who refused to bend to white corporate expectations. Music mogul Uncle Luke and podcaster Joe Budden backed him up, calling Shedeur's draft slide a blessing in disguise because it ripped the mask off the league and exposed the bias running deep in its system. The comparisons to Colin Kaepernick's blackballing came instantly, and they hit hard because the parallels are undeniable. A talented player who didn't fit the mold getting quietly erased from the conversation. But the NFL wasn't taking those claims quietly. Teams fired back fast, denying any racial or political motive and pointing instead to legitimate concerns from the draft process. Reports suddenly popped up saying Shedeur bombed multiple team interviews. Anonymous coaches painted him as unprepared for playbook breakdowns, too confrontational when questioning team culture. And get this, one even claimed he took a FaceTime call in the middle of an interview. One coach went so far as to call it the worst formal interview I've ever had. That's the kind of dirt that spreads fast and sticks even faster, the kind that gets whispered in war rooms and shapes careers before a single snap is played. Then came the criticism about his decision to skip combined workouts. Shedeur chose to meet only with top 7 teams, a bold move meant to flex his value, but it backfired spectacularly. Scouts began whispering that his confidence was arrogance, that his sideline body language screamed entitlement, and that he blamed teammates too easily when plays fell apart. Suddenly his swagger was being twisted into a lack of humility, the exact opposite of what NFL execs want from a young rookie, especially one who's already in the spotlight. And hovering over it all was the Deion factor, because people want to see him succeed, or they want to see him fail, but they want to see him on the field. Yeah, that's what it comes down to. I want to see him on the field, and I want to see him sink or swim. That's the honest truth. Nobody wants to admit this has become entertainment, not evaluation, and Shedeur is the main character whether he likes it or not. Deion Sanders didn't just defend his son, he challenged the entire NFL. Publicly, he listed which cities he'd approve for Shedeur to play in, echoing Eli Manning's infamous draft stance, and that move alone sent shockwaves through the league. Behind the scenes, insiders say he warned critics that if they called his son arrogant, he'd expose them, which made drafting Shedeur feel less like adding talent and more like inviting chaos. It became clear that drafting Shedeur didn't just mean signing a quarterback, it meant taking on the Sanders empire, the media circus, the high expectations, the legacy pressure, all of it. For cautious general managers terrified of drama, that felt less like a pick and more like stepping into a media storm ready to explode, and nobody wanted to be the franchise that went to war with primetime on national television. So when the Cleveland Browns finally snagged Shedeur Sanders with the 144th pick in the 5th round, the world didn't know what to make of it. Was this a team boldly taking a chance on a superstar who'd been unfairly buried? Was it a franchise daring to break an unspoken pact among NFL owners? Or was it something way more complicated hiding under the surface? The move had people buzzing, but no one could agree on whether it was courage or pure chaos. Browns GM Andrew Berry tried to calm the noise, telling reporters the time we spent with Shedeur and what he's done throughout his college career is impressive. I understand you're both rookies, but say something like, hey, I'm excited to see him, be a professional. And then the entire thing of miming, I'm like, it's something out of a child's playbook. And the idea is like, oh, he's responding to Rex Ryan. You are a quarterback in the National Football League. Why are we responding to Rex Ryan on ESPN when all he really says is you should be starting, but it's your own behavior? So you double down, triple down on the negative behavior narrative. Like that position more than any position, you need a leader of men. That criticism stings because it ignores the impossible position Shedeur is in. Damned if he speaks, damned if he doesn't. It sounded like confidence, like belief, like they'd found their guy, but that illusion shattered fast because what unfolded next showed that belief inside the organization wasn't universal, not even close. And here's where things turned dark, career-ending dark. Because if you thought Shedeur's humiliating draft night was the end of his troubles, you're about to find out it was only the beginning. This next chapter is betrayal at the highest level. Picture this: the owner, the man who signs every check, the face of the franchise, the billionaire shot caller, decides to publicly distance himself from his own draft pick before the poor kid even throws a single NFL pass. It happened on July 29th, 2025 at Browns training camp. Owner Jimmy Haslam, the billionaire behind the pilot-flying J-Truck Stop empire, worth an estimated $8.5 billion, stepped up to the mic and dropped a bomb that shook the league. When reporters asked about the Shedeur Sanders pick, Haslam didn't sugarcoat a thing. He said that decision was 100% Andrew Berry's. I had absolutely no input whatsoever, then added that he personally preferred other quarterbacks in that draft. Just like that, the young quarterback's welcome turned into a public disowning. The message was loud and brutal. Shedeur might wear Cleveland's colors, but the man at the top didn't want him there. Now, you might be asking, why on earth would an owner do that? Why would a billionaire publicly throw his own draft pick under the bus before the kid even got a fair shot? Well, according to insiders, Jimmy Haslam wasn't acting out of emotion, he was playing politics. Reports say he was trying to calm down furious NFL owners who were livid that Cleveland had broken an unspoken agreement: don't touch Shedeur Sanders. Remember, the Browns were already public enemy number 1 in the NFL after giving Deshaun Watson that fully guaranteed mega contract. The league's elite had never forgiven them for it, so when Cleveland drafted Shedeur, it looked like another slap in the face to the establishment. A defiant "we'll do what we want" move that made Haslam's phone light up with angry calls. So to save face and protect his standing with his billionaire buddies, Haslam decided to make a sacrifice. He publicly distanced himself from Shedeur, throwing him to the wolves to prove his loyalty to the old guard. And that message, it landed hard, not just for Shedeur, but for every player, coach, and fan watching. It screamed this kid isn't wanted here. The owner didn't believe in him, and if the guy signing the checks doesn't want you, what chance do you really have? But here's where it gets real. Shedeur didn't fold, not even close. When reporters swarmed him after Haslam's comments, he stood tall and fired back, "I'm here to prove them wrong. Actions speak louder." He stayed calm, focused, and professional. He talked about earning respect through performance, controlling what he could, and shutting out the noise. That's poise most veterans don't even have, the kind of mental toughness that separates good players from great ones. Then came the preseason, and Shedeur delivered. In his debut against the Carolina Panthers, he went 14 of 23 for 138 yards and 2 touchdowns with 0 interceptions. He looked sharp, confident, ready to compete, like a quarterback who belonged on an NFL field. But instead of climbing the ladder, the Browns shoved him down it. They signed Joe Flacco, a 40-year-old quarterback who hadn't been relevant since his Super Bowl run with Baltimore in 2013. Then they drafted Dillon Gabriel, a rookie from Oklahoma, and still had Kenny Pickett, a former first-rounder from Pittsburgh. On paper, competition's supposed to make everyone better, but this wasn't competition. This was a setup, a deliberate attempt to bury Shedeur so deep he'd never see daylight. Reports from camp said Flacco and Gabriel were getting all the first-team reps, while Shedeur was stuck running scout team drills, throwing passes against the starting defense, barely seen by top coaches. He wasn't getting the same coaching attention, the same reps, or even the same evaluation chances. It was clear they were pushing him out quietly, piece by piece, erasing him from the picture before he could prove he deserved to be there. By the time the regular season rolled around, the depth chart said it all. QB3, the break glass in case of emergency guy, the same quarterback who threw for 4,034 yards and 37 touchdowns at Colorado, the same player scouts once called the most accurate passer in college football, now buried on the bench, treated like an afterthought. For a kid who was supposed to carry a legacy, Cleveland had turned his dream debut into a silent exile, a slow suffocation of potential that nobody wanted to acknowledge. The wildest part, Shedeur Sanders, the same kid who'd done everything right in camp, showed up early, put in the work, nailed the playbook, was still listed as QB3. I agree with you, because my brothers used to tell me all the time. I said, man, I'll be in training camp, and I'll be like, man, I ain't getting no reps today, or I'll be in practice, Once I made a team, he said, don't worry about it. He said, one day John Elway's gonna call on you. He said, just make sure when he calls your number, you better be ready. Ready, got to be ready. That's the mentality Shedeur needs right now, because opportunity in the NFL doesn't knock twice. The Browns kicked off the 2025 season at 1-3, clearly in trouble, and when head coach Kevin Stefanski announced a quarterback change, everyone thought this was finally Shedeur's moment. But no, he benched Joe Flacco and handed the starting job to Dillon Gabriel, a third-round rookie still learning the ropes. Flacco slid to quarterback 2, while Shedeur stayed buried at quarterback 3 like he hadn't even existed. Let that sink in. The Browns were struggling badly. They needed a spark, someone who could light up the field and energize a dead locker room, and yet the one quarterback on their roster with elite college stats, charisma, and a chip on his shoulder big enough to fuel a comeback wasn't even considered. Instead, they went with Gabriel, a solid prospect, sure, but not a proven playmaker, not someone who'd thrown for over 4,000 yards and 37 touchdowns like Shedeur had. The decision made 0 sense, and the whispers inside the league started again, was this personal? And then came the moment that blew up the internet, because what Shedeur did next wasn't just unexpected, it was legendary. On October 1st, 2025, during a Wednesday media session, reporters crowded around him asking the usual questions about the quarterback change, about being QB3, about his development under Joe Flacco, basic stuff every player answers. But Shedeur flipped the script completely. He didn't storm out, he didn't argue, he didn't even speak. Instead, he delivered the quietest and loudest statement of his young career. Shedeur mouthed every single answer in complete silence. His lips moved, his face stayed calm, but not a single sound came out. Cameras caught it all, every word, every motion, but no one could hear him. It was eerie, powerful, and defiant all at once. A silent protest in the middle of an NFL media circus that nobody saw coming. The internet exploded. Some called it genius, others called it disrespectful, but everyone was talking about it, and that was the point. Analysts lost their minds. Dan Orlovsky from ESPN slammed the move as embarrassing and immature. Rex Ryan, who had already criticized Shedeur before, went off again saying there's no time or place for antics like that from a QB3, but to the fans it felt different. It felt symbolic, like the kid who'd been silenced by ownership, ignored by coaches, and frozen out by the system had finally found a way to speak without saying a word. But here's what all those loud critics missed. Shedeur Sanders wasn't being immature. He was being calculated. Every move, every silence, every look, it was strategy. Because every time this kid spoke, his words got twisted like headlines waiting to happen. When he showed confidence, they called him arrogant. When he spoke with belief, they said he was entitled. When he backed up his teammates, it wasn't genuine enough. And when he stayed quiet, they accused him of having an attitude. No matter what he did, they found a reason to hate it, so he stopped playing their game entirely. That's when his mother, Pilar Sanders, stepped in, and she did not hold back. She went off on Rex Ryan and the rest of the media mob, calling them cancerous and jealous. She laid out the truth loud and clear. The double standard was blatant. When other quarterbacks show swagger and confidence, they're called leaders. But when a black quarterback named Sanders does it, especially the son of Deion Primetime Sanders, suddenly it's a problem. She said what millions were already thinking, and for a moment, the whole conversation flipped because, let's be real, no other third-string quarterback in the NFL gets grilled like this. Nobody's shoving microphones in their face every single day asking about team politics or play calling decisions that aren't even theirs. Most QB3s barely get mentioned on game day, but Shedeur, he's trending every week even when he doesn't play a single snap. That's not football pressure, that's a target painted on his back from day one. So where does that leave us? With one of the most gifted quarterbacks of his generation stuck in a nightmare, a young man who fell in the draft under shady circumstances, an owner who publicly disowned him before he ever threw a pass, a coaching staff keeping him buried despite weak play from the starters, and a national audience that can't decide if they love him or hate him. But here's the truth, Shedeur Sanders isn't just fighting for snaps, he's fighting for survival, because in the NFL, a 5th round pick doesn't get endless chances. If he doesn't see the field soon, if he doesn't get that moment to prove himself under those bright lights, his career could be over before it ever truly begins. No second chances, no rewinds, no mercy. That's the cold reality of this league, and Shedeur is standing in the middle of it, refusing to break while everyone around him waits to see if he cracks. Analysts and former players are sounding the alarm. This whole situation could bury Shedeur Sanders' career for good, because once the league slaps a label on you, problem player, bad attitude, uncoachable, it sticks like glue. Fair or not, that reputation becomes your shadow. And in the NFL, shadows talk, teams talk, scouts swap notes. Once word spreads that a guy might be too much trouble, the doors start closing fast. And if the Browns decide that Shedeur isn't worth the drama, why would another team risk their PR image picking him up? The path forward is razor thin. Right now, Dylan Gabriel is gearing up to start against the Vikings in London. If he plays well, Shedeur might never touch the field this season. If Gabriel flops, there's still Joe Flacco, the 40-year-old backup waiting in the wings, and even if both quarterbacks tank completely, there's still no guarantee Kevin Stefanski would finally give Shedeur his shot, not when the owner has already made it crystal clear where he stands. The dysfunction in Cleveland runs deep, and everyone knows it, but nobody wants to admit that a talented kid is paying the price for it. But let's imagine the wild card. Let's say the Browns keep losing, drop to 1-7, and decide to throw the kid in just to see what happens. The moment that happens, the weight on Shedeur's shoulders will be crushing. He won't just be playing for a win, he'll be playing for vindication. He'd be fighting to prove every scout who doubted him dead wrong, to justify his father's relentless faith in him, to show Jimmy Haslam that his cold public disowning was a massive mistake, to silence every critic who said his fall in the draft was just business as usual instead of what many believe it was, collusion and bias built on fear and control. But here's the nightmare part. Even if Shedeur balls out, even if he plays with ice in his veins and drops highlight after highlight, it might still not be enough because the narrative around him has already been written. The media has painted him as difficult. The old guard of the NFL has quietly made up its mind, and breaking through that wall takes more than just talent. It takes dominance, sustained undeniable excellence that leaves no room for doubt, no air for critics to breathe.